Welcome to another episode of Adultish Presents Fifi After Dark, where your host, Afiya, is left all alone with the recording equipment and a drink in her hand. You can listen, like, comment, share, and subscribe to Adultish on most streaming platforms, as well as find us on Twitter at AdultishP0DCAST. Welcome to another episode of Adultish Presents Fifi After Dark. As always, it's your host, Afiya. And before I continue on with today's episode, I would like to make one note. Today is Monday, November 11th. Whoop, missed a whole month. Monday, November 11th. And on this day, we are celebrating Veterans Day. And with that, I would like to take a few seconds just to give a round of applause to all the servicemen and servicewomen who have risked their lives for this country, who have lost their lives for this country, for doing the service of keeping us civilians safe. To be very specific, I do have a few veterans in my life who I would like to shout out. First and foremost would be my brother-in-law, Mr. OG. I want to give you a shout out for being a 20-year Marine Corps vet. I want to thank you again for everything that you've done for us as civilians, as a country, and I would like to thank you for all that you're continuing to do for my sister and my niece and nephew as a husband and a father, respectively. I know we've had another guest on the show of Adultish, Mr. Rob Lamatic. He's also a veteran, so I just want to take a time out to shout him out and say thank you for all the work that you've done for this country, both, as a veteran in the military, as well as just being a friend for me in general. So there is that. And to all the other vets in my life, I know there's a few of you right now. I'm not even sure if you're all listening, but I just wanted to say thank you all for all the work that you've done and just give you one more round of applause as we celebrate everything that you do, all that you are on this Veterans Day. Awesome. So moving forward with this episode of Fifi After Dark, I will be kicking off this episode with a mini cocktail that I've made for myself, as it is after 4, which means it's happy hour somewhere in the city. The drink of choice today is a wine cooler that I have spiked with a little bit of Al Punto vodka from the Port Morris Distillery in the Bronx. So let me take my 2 sips. And now let's move on. So today's topic is a little heavy. It's a little somber. So just giving you a warning. And it deals with the phrase, the sins of the father. Just ahead of trying to do this podcast or record this episode, I did a little digging for the full phrase of sins of the father, because you hear it often. It's like, oh, sins of the father, and it's sins of the father shall be passed down to the sons, or sins of the father shall be visited by the sons, or visited upon the sons, rather. So sins of the father shall be visited upon the sons. And I've been looking for the phrase, and apparently the Bible doesn't explicitly say the phrase in that way, right? It's broken up in multitudes of ways. However, over time, people have just created this saying, sins of the father shall be visited upon their sons, or the sons. And that resonated with me this past weekend, as not only did I go to therapy and was I talking a little bit about some of the things that came up for me, which included some things with my dad and my mom, but also a conversation that I had with my mother this past weekend. And not to get too deep into the conversation, also not to give you guys the impression that the conversation was extraordinarily brutal or anything like that, but there was a conversation that had happened over my mother being who she is and doing what she likes to do, and you know, handling life the way she handles life. She had did something to our property that one of my sisters, if not both, were just not, we all didn't like. We just thought like this didn't make any sense. It was a liability. Like, let's not do that. In any event, in this thing happening, I'm speaking to one of my sisters about a time in which my mother may have said something to me in the past, that kind of gave me this impression that, you know what, she's going to do her. She's always going to do whatever she wants to do. So at this point, I'm not going to, you know, try to impose a lot of my thought or my suggestions on her, because essentially she's, you know, she's going to make whatever decision she wants. She has free will to do so. And in telling one of my sisters that, she somehow managed to pass on this scenario onto my mother, who then called me in for a conversation with her about this scenario in question that happened several years ago. And the reason why it resonates, the sins of the father shall be visited upon the children or upon the sons, is that what I find funny with parenting is that parents aren't fully aware that what they do to their children will be manifested in their development, or it will manifest itself some way, somehow, as they become adults, right? And one part of adulting is us kind of taking in these things from our parents, taking in these things from these experiences that we've had with our parents, and kind of like forming our own opinions on what we would like to do or what we wouldn't like to do. And if we've had overbearing parents, we overcompensate in some way, shape, or form, right? So, for instance, I had a parent who she was very overprotective when we were younger, and she had every right to be overprotective because she was the sole childcare provider in the household. Our father was not present. Not to say that I don't have a father. I have a father, and we've discussed this on previous Fifi After Dark episodes. I have a father, but he was not present in my life. And because of that, my mother felt very much like she had to be mother and father. And because she had to be mother and father, she was very, I wouldn't say strict, but she was very domineering in the way in which she wanted us to lead our lives, essentially. The way in which we did things like going out, hanging with our friends, and this, that, and the third. There were always some rules or guidelines or some kind of restrictions around doing such things. And while that sounds all fine and dandy, that yes, as a parent, you should give your children rules, you should give them boundaries, you should give them guidelines, it is the way in which you do said things that can mold your child, right? So if you have a parent who's super strict, you're going to grow up one of two ways as a child into adulthood. Either you're going to adhere to that very strict guideline and then yourself be sheltered or very reclusive because that's all you've known, because that's the way your parent has parented you, or you're going to be super rebellious, right? Where it's like, I hated everything that my parent did, so I'm going to do the exact opposite, right? Again, that overcompensation. You're going to overcompensate because of the fact that you couldn't do A, B, and C as a youngster. So now as an adult, you're going to break free of all those restrictions, all those guidelines that came to you when you were a kid. And again, sins of the father shall be visited upon the sons, right? So the way, the things that your parent did in the past is going to affect you in some kind of way. Now, to get back to my anecdote, my mother had said something to me when I was younger about how we lived and basically my agency, right? In her way, she was just stripping it away, saying like, you have no agency. And of course, this is something that's very common in households, when parents go, well, you live under my rules, my roof, so you must abide by my rules, that kind of thing. However, she didn't say it in that kind of way. And I took it in to mean, very much like, well, this is my mother's house, so I can't do anything that I want because this is my mother's house. Fast forward several years, many years later, and this conversation comes up where we're talking about, the scenario in which, the words played out. And my mother says something to me along the lines of, well, she does one of three things. First, she denies ever saying it, number one. Secondly, she then says that as her children, we shouldn't take what she says very seriously. And then third, she goes on to say, well, it was so long ago, like the fact that why are you even thinking about it? Why is something like that, even something that you would bring up? That's so long ago. It's so old. And what stands out to me the most out of everything, out of the entire conversation, is how hard it was for her to just apologize for saying what she said. And that, again, kind of like brought me to this topic, because a lot of what some people go through with parents who kind of just don't know how to say sorry to kids comes from the parent feeling like, I'm the parent, I shouldn't have to bring myself down to the level of my child, because they're always going to look at you as their child, as an extension of them, but an inferior extension of them, for a lack of a better term. Let's just say it like that, because they don't look at you on the same level. They don't see you on the same plane. They see themselves above you, because they can tell you yes and no and not to do something, and yes, you can do something. They are the harbingers of permissions as you're growing up, and with that comes power. So they have more power over you. So they don't ever, for some people with parents, they just don't ever see their children growing into their own power and being an adult. They will always see them as children. And things like that can absolutely affect the way in which a child grows into an adult, right? Especially with my mother saying, one of the things with her was saying how, like, you shouldn't be affected by the things that I say to you. Like, you shouldn't take those things so seriously. But understand that as a parent, right, whatever you say is going to have weight when you say it to your child. Okay. And granted, I am a childless single woman, but I can say that I can look at people and go, you shouldn't talk to your kid like that, because that is going to carry over in ways that you don't understand. Or, there are things that maybe you can and can't do with your kids, because that's going to carry on in some way, shape, or form. And so in her saying to me, well, you shouldn't take everything I say so seriously. How can I not? Right? If you get into an argument with your parent and they tell you, be quiet, you're quiet. You listen to them because, again, they have the authority, right? So here is a person with authority saying, take everything that I say seriously, except for the hurtful things, except for the things that can potentially be hurtful. Don't take those things seriously. And you can't, as a child, you can't disassociate what's to be taken serious from what's not to be taken serious, right? You can't, in your own mind, filter out, okay, my mom is serious when she's saying this, but not when she's saying that, or my dad is serious when he's saying this, but not when he's doing that. You take everything with a grain of severity. And so that, because of what she said to me, manifested itself so much so that when me and my sister were talking, I brought it up. I think she had a moment in that conversation to be like, wow, like, I didn't realize that me saying this to you would carry, you would carry this with you for such a long time. And again, she still didn't say she was sorry. She was just like, shouldn't take it so seriously.